Jesus as the final judge, evidence of his divinity. The Bible consistently teaches that judgment belongs to God alone. In the Old Testament, God is depicted as the ultimate judge of all humanity. Genesis 18:25, Psalm 96:13, Isaiah 33:22. However, the New Testament reveals that Jesus Christ will preside as the final judge of all creation. This unique role is a profound declaration of his divinity, as it attributes to him an authority that only God can wield. Biblical evidence of Jesus as the final judge. Jesus declares himself the judge. For the Father judges no one, but has given all judgment to the Son. John 5:22. In this verse, Jesus explicitly claims that God the Father has entrusted all judgment to him. This delegation of divine authority underscores Jesus' unique role in salvation history. Jesus will judge every person. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each one may receive what is due for what he has done in the body, whether good or evil. 2 Corinthians chapter 5:10. Paul affirms that everyone, believers and non-believers alike, will stand before Christ to be judged for their actions. Jesus judges with divine authority. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him will be gathered all the nations, and he will separate people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. Matthew 25:31-32. Jesus is portrayed as a king seated on a throne, exercising authority over all nations. His judgment determines the eternal destiny of humanity, a role only God can fulfill. Jesus judges based on knowledge of the heart. And he commanded us to preach to the people and to testify that he is the one appointed by God to be judge of the living and the dead. Acts 10:42. The ability to judge the living and the dead requires omniscience, a divine attribute. Only God can fully understand the thoughts, intentions, and deeds of every person. 1 Samuel 16:7. The judgment seat of Christ. On that day when, according to my gospel, God judges the secrets of men by Christ Jesus, Romans 2:16. Paul connects the judgment of God directly to Jesus Christ, equating Christ's judgment with divine authority. Theological implications. The role of judge belongs to God alone. In Isaiah 33:22, the prophet declares, "For the Lord is our judge, the Lord is our lawgiver, the Lord is our king, he will save us." By assuming this role, Jesus not only fulfills Old Testament expectations of God's judgment, but also demonstrates his equality with the Father. Moreover, judgment requires attributes such as omniscience, to know all actions and intentions, omnipotence, to enforce judgment, and sovereignty, to determine eternal destinies. These attributes are uniquely divine, affirming that Jesus is not merely a human or created being, but God himself. Challenges for skeptics and non-believers. How can judgment be delegated to a mere human? In John 5:22, Jesus claims that the Father has entrusted all judgment to him. How can this be reconciled if Jesus is not divine, given that judgment is God's prerogative? Why will all stand before Christ's judgment seat? 2 Corinthians 5:10 declares that everyone will appear before the judgment seat of Christ. If Jesus is not God, why does he preside over the judgment of all humanity? How can Jesus know the hearts of all people? In Romans 2:16, Paul states that Jesus will judge the secrets of men. If only God knows the heart, Jeremiah 17:10, how can Jesus perform this role without being God? What does the sheep and goats parable reveal? In Matthew 25:31-32, Jesus sits on a glorious throne and separates the righteous from the unrighteous. How can he exercise such authority if he is not divine? Why is Jesus the judge of the living and the dead? Acts 10:42 describes Jesus as the judge of both the living and the dead. What created being has the power to preside over the eternal destinies of all humanity? How can Jesus be the fulfillment of Isaiah 33:22? Isaiah describes the Lord as the ultimate judge. How can Jesus fulfill this role without being Yahweh himself? Why do apostles attribute judgment to Jesus? The apostles, rooted in Jewish monotheism, affirm that Jesus will judge the world, e.g. Romans 14:10. Were they mistaken, or did they witness evidence of his divine authority? Who else can judge the nations? In Joel 3:12, God calls the nations to stand before him for judgment. How can Jesus assume this role without being equal to God? What does Jesus' omniscience imply? Judgment requires complete knowledge of every action and thought. If Jesus is not God, how can he possess this omniscience? How do you explain universal worship in judgment? Philippians 2:10-11 states that every knee will bow to Jesus. If Jesus is not God, why is he worshipped in the context of judgment?